Tonight on the Peas, Five Nights at Freddy. I have a theory that Nick and Gerald are going to vehemently disagree. But that's just a theory.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's another episode of Two Peas on a podcast where we discuss the latest and sometimes greatest movies every week. Gerald is here with you, and over on the other side, I think he's in a suit of some kind. It looks like a beautiful chef teddy bear kind of thing. Nicholas, how are you? There he is.
I'm going to chop you up and feed you to all the kids at Chuck E. Cheese, Gerald.
Wait, what?
What? Hey, I said hi.
Wow.
Yeah, good to see you too.
By the way, good to see you, brother. Thanks to producer Dan for doing the cold open for us there.
Love you, Dan.
And any fans of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise will probably appreciate his cold open. He had to explain it to us, Nick. We didn't really know what he was talking about.
He did.
We didn't really know what he was talking about. But we are discussing Five Nights at Freddy's, the new film that just released from Blumhouse. Not four. We're going to discuss all five of them. It dropped in theaters on Friday, and it also went straight to Peacock on streaming, which we will discuss a little bit about the day and date release now that we are past COVID. Is a bit strange, but I don't think it hurt the box office. I don't know if you saw the numbers on this thing, but as horror tends to do, it really blew up at the box office. But we'll get into all that when we discuss in the review. But before we get there, we start every episode, Nick, with what we like to call one big question.
You gotta ask yourself a question.
I have a lot of questions. Number one, how dare you?
I'm kicking this one off this week too, baby, because this is tangentially related, and then I'm going to explain why after you give your answer. Gerald, what is a movie that has made you question going to the movie theater to see movies anymore? What movie is there? A movie that's ever seriously made you? I'm being dead serious. Is there a movie that has ever made you want to be like, you know what? I don't want to waste my time going to the movies anymore because the experience was so bad. Like, and this is not related to the score of the movie or anything like that.
I was going to say, are we getting a little foreshadowing here?
This is related very specifically to my trip to see this movie. So I want to hear your answer for this if you've ever come that close, and then I'll explain my trip to the theater to see this movie.
Well, I'm trying. Obviously, the idea is to give you the answer off the top of my head here. So I'm going to say when I took my wife to a local theater here called the Rialto, which is actually not even in business anymore. It was a very, very old school movie house. They had like two screens, and they showed like all these old independent films. And
nice.
It's been around since like the 50s or whatever. And sadly, it's gone out of business because of COVID. But we went there several years ago, probably about 10 years ago, to see Terrence Malick's The Tree of Life.
Oh, God.
All right. Now, I know a lot of our friends over at In Session and some other people and, like see this movie in a different light, and that's great. Like, if this is your thing,
JD knows full well how much I despise Tree of Life. It is so bad.
JD, if you're listening to this, I'm so sorry, buddy. But
I love you, JD.
So
love you.
We went to see this at the Rialto, and my wife, who is the most just the most chill person that would not in any way show her ass in any way, about an hour into the movie was like, I can't do this. And she literally left. and she left me sitting there. And in my mind, I'm going, I don't know what is this? Where's Brad Pitt? Like, what's happening? And so I got up. I'm like, all right, she's upset.
For reference, for the people that have seen the movie, that's about halfway through the the like montage of like where the dinosaurs, the really bad CGI dinosaurs are running around. It's like halfway through that probably.
I go out to the lobby and I'm like, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And she's like, I just can't watch this Windows 95 screensaver anymore. And I'm going, you know what? Let's just go.
I can't. Savagery.
I'm not going to do it either because because also it's 2.5 hours, so it was like not even halfway over at that point. So that was a moment where I was like, I don't know. I mean, obviously I have continued to go to the movies, but I just kind of thought to myself, I'm going to be careful with who I bring to the movies with me because not everybody's going to be into cinema like me. And I felt bad for, in a way, kind of torturing her with this Terrence Malick, existential viewing or whatever. So that was the first thing that came to mind. It's also a really fond memory of one of our date nights. It's just kind of hilarious to think back on. So
Okay.
now you came up with this question. So what's your answer for that?
My answer is Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh God,
So
here we go.
This movie came out same day and date on Peacock. Okay.
Yeah.
I could have stayed home and watched this thing from the comfort of my own home
Right.
here. But instead I was like, no, I love going to the theater. I really do love
Mhm.
going to the theater. It's always been one of my favorite things ever.
Yeah, of
It's one of the
course.
reasons I love movies so much is just that theatrical experience. Like I really do enjoy it. I had a ticket time, Gerald, of 11:30 a.m. Okay.
Oh wow.
11:30 a.m. Do you know what time the movie actually started?
Well, if it was an AMC, it probably just started a couple hours ago. They run more ads than
No,
the NFL.
it's a Regal. It
Oh, okay.
started at 11:58 a.m. So almost a half an hour of commercials and trailers and more commercials. Now Regal, I don't know if any other theaters do this, but now Regal actually runs commercials in between trailers too. So it's not
Oh,
enough to
wow.
have like a ton of commercials at the top and then like your
Oh,
trailers, like you get that delineation. No, you get
Yikes.
commercials peppered in all through the trailers and everything like that as well.
No good.
Do you know how I knew it was 11:58, Gerald?
No.
Because the woman in front of me was on her phone literally the entire freaking movie. Brought her kids to the movie, was clearly just bored to tears by it.
What?
Like brought her kids to the movie and everything like that, and was just sitting there and like on her phone the
We're-
entire time. So that's the only reason I knew. And she just happened to be sitting in like this direct, like perfect placement that every time she turned her phone on, it was this big beacon. Like I was like a mosquito being drawn to the bug zapper, like bloop, like instantly, like as soon as this thing lit up. And then the kicker, Gerald,
Yeah.
is all I heard. The sound I heard. This is all I heard throughout this whole movie. Are you ready?
Oh God. No, I don't think I am. Oh shit. Oh shit. From her? From the same person?
No. So behind me, someone behind me, they weren't sleeping.
What?
This is a person that is just very
That was how they
clearly
breathe?
never ever done any kind of physical activity in their entire life. Legitimately
Oh, God.
sounded like they were like sitting there drawing their final breath every time. I could very audibly hear them breathing behind me the entire runtime of this. And again, I say this because, Gerald, I could have stayed home. This came out on Peacock the same day. I could have stayed home and just watched this from the comfort of my home in my office and not had to deal with any of it. And so like I love going to the movies, but people, and I know the people that are listening to this are like movie lovers and cinephiles who shut their phones off like right when they get in there, or like when the trailers start. Like I'm on my phone until the trailers start basically, and then that's when I turn my phone off. Like I turn it off. I don't put it on silent or what. Just turn it off.
Yeah,
like
D&D, man. Do not disturb.
You know, like and like I know like nobody that's listening to this is like that kind of person, but like people have some friggin' etiquette and some common courtesy for the other people in the theater when you go in there. I mean, the dude that was sitting behind me just honestly needed to like go run some laps or something, like get some, like, I don't breathe the best. Like I don't have the best breathing at all. Like I hate my breathing, but his was like,
I thought you meant he was. Yeah, I thought you meant he was sleeping for a minute.
It literally
was, like snoring.
His normal breathing sounded like he was just having sleep apnea, like awake apnea. I guess I don't even know. It was dreadful, man.
Well, sorry for that guy. Sorry for that guy. Not to poke fun at him, but that reminds me, by the way, while you were giving that story of two parents, young parents, that brought their newborn child to see Insidious.
Every time I see an infant in a movie theater, it makes me want to scream.
But it was Insidious when I went to see that, which I don't know if you know, that's a fucking scary horror movie from like 10 years ago.
I mean, it's an infant though. It probably couldn't see it probably.
Well, no, but I
mean,
mean, my point was it started crying about 30 minutes into the movie, and they had to leave with it, and it came back, and like, I think I heard some breastfeeding going on at some point.
That
So
was
I,
you.
you know,
That
there,
was you. Come on.
there's a lot of weird stuff going on during my Insidious screening. So it just reminded me of that. Wow. Okay, I got one for you, man. My one big question for you, and I'm actually kind of struggling a little bit with my own answer, but I think I have my own answer. So,
Okay.
Five Nights at Freddy's was initially a video game. All right, back in I think 2014.
It's a lot of video games. Have you
And
seen how many games there are in this
yeah,
series? There's a lot of
yeah.
them.
Well, I
Like they
don't know a
pump
lot of
out like one or two of these a year.
right, right. So we have the film adaptation of that now, right? So my question to you is, what movie are you surprised or do you wish would be turned into a video game that you could play and go through the story of the video game, but it's based on a popular movie?
Man, you know what it'd be dope? Is we just talked about it on the show a few weeks ago, the creator. Like that'd be like super cool to like be
Okay.
able to be like a like a resistance. You can pick your side. You can either join the American side or whatever and be against the AI, or you can be an AI, or you can be a robot, or like any of those kind of different things. It could be like an open
Okay.
world, like a Red Dead Redemption style game where it's open world, like
I can see
Skyrim.
it.
Go do quests and stuff like that, and like
I
you
can
have
see
to
it.
topple the other side. Yeah, that'd be pretty cool. And you're trying to unravel the mystery of how did that nuke actually get detonated, and actually
Right.
tell you the thing that the film just kind of glosses over in a throwaway line of dialogue.
Right, sure. You could go a little more in depth there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. That'd be cool. And I mean, then you could like customize your robot or customize your AI or whatever, and all this kind of different stuff. Yeah.
Well,
be
for
cool.
me, you're talking about mystery, right? And kind of got me thinking a little bit. And actually, there's been rumors that this might be in development for the near future.
Okay.
So I've kind of heard rumblings of it, in fairness,
Okay.
but I've never seen it. It's not confirmed. But the Scream franchise, Ghostface,
How is Scream
Like-
not a video game already?
I know it's not. Yeah, like I said, there's kind of been talks about it might be coming, but if you had that Scream video game where you could either be Ghostface or you could be one of the victims being chased by Ghostface, you could be the final girl. And what's cool about the Scream franchise, which we kind of touched on a little bit when we talked about it last week, is that it could be anybody. You never know who is Ghostface. It could be any of the people involved in the game. So it could kind of take on that whodunit kind of vibe too, where it would be like Clue, where you're trying to figure out who the if you're playing in multiplayer or whatever, you're trying to figure out who the killer, who's behind the mask. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
And here's
think
the thing,
it might be coming, but
Here's the
until
thing.
then, I'm wishing for it.
You need a video game developer that has the deft hand of a Wes Craven in a video game format, because if you're going to make a Scream video game, then I'm expecting a Scream video game is going to flip video game tropes on their head the same way that Scream flips horror movie tropes on their head. Like,
That'd be good.
It's got to be a movie that's going to it's got to be a video game that's going to subvert like the audience's expectation. Honestly, if you tell me I just get to be Ghostface and run around killing teenagers, that's not as exciting to me as like something that's going to flip video game. And I don't even know how to do, like, because I don't play like a lot of horror themed games, to be honest. But like, well, I play Phasmo, I guess that counts. But like, I'm trying to think to myself, I'm just like, it would have to have whoever that developer is that's like, the Wes Craven of horror video game development, whatever, they could really, really deftly like use video games like to its advantage. Like maybe you start off at like, you build a character, like you start off as a character, you build a character creator or whatever, and
That'd
then
be cool,
your character gets killed off in like the first act of the game or something like that, and then you have to assume control of a different character or something like that. Like maybe something like that would be kind of cool.
I'm into it, dude. I mean, I'm into it. My son, my 10-year-old, we'll talk about him a lot tonight, actually, because he had a lot of thoughts about Five Nights at Freddy's because he played the video game. And he's 10, and he's been playing it for the last couple of years, and he knew a lot of the kind of inside jokes, if you will, in the movie and stuff like that.
My understanding of this is that it's these games, like, because I did some reading after the movie, you're basically just in a room and you can't leave. Like, you're in the security office and you can't leave. And like you have
to watch the cameras.
You have to watch the cameras and stuff, and you have to stop the animatronics in one of them. It's like it always varies it up a little bit, but like
sure,
a lot of the entries I read about, it was just like, yeah, it's like you're in the security room and you can't leave it, and you have to basically do different things to stop them from getting to the room and killing you.
Got it. So, yeah, I don't know. I've never played it, but we'll talk a lot about his perspective as well, because I think that kind of plays in a little bit to the conversation tonight when you're talking about demographic. So we'll kind of touch on that a little bit as we go out. And he gave me some thoughts that he wanted me to share on his behalf tonight, so I'll be happy to do that as well. Okay. But thank you for one big question, Nick. Now, before we get into the topic and the review at hand for Five Nights at Freddy's, we always give our score out of 10 up front, our individual scores. We have not discussed it with each other, and then we will talk about how we arrived at that number in the early score reveal.
Damn it, this always happens. I think I'm going to score, and then I never score. It's not fair.
It's just not fair.
Nick, you know what is fair, though?
What?
Last week, okay, now you are a person I look up to. I appreciate your advice every week. I went through, okay, and I wrote the number 1 through the number 10 on pieces of paper in my notebook. Ooh. So therefore, I have these numbers available to use at the ready. Oh. However, this is a number I have used on the show before.
Oh, it's a 10.
So I kept. Did I use? Oh, I used a 10 for past lives. You're right.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to count us in, Nick, and we're going to give our early score reveal again. Me and Nick don't know what we thought of this movie. Here we go. We'll start with this. 3, 2, 1. Let's see it, brother.
2.
What? Nick gave it a 2. I gave it a 5 with a frowny face. A 5 from me, a 2 from Nick, which is a 3.5.
Whoa!
How about that quick math, by the way? How about that quick math?
Who have you been studying during the week?
Yeah, no,
I've been drinking. You've been borrowing
I'm drunk. I'm good.
You've been borrowing your son's math book and like doing his math problems for him or something.
Wow, Nick did not like this movie.
I
liked it a little bit more, but all right, okay. So we talked a little bit about your experience with the moviegoers that were there in the theater with you. A 2 is low, brother. That's like I hated it, right? Or is that not fair to say?
A 2 out of 10 for me is utter vehement hatred. Yes, I despise.
Spoiler free. Go ahead. Every
single minute of this. I mean, okay. So that's why I get to 2. The only thing I liked about this was like the actual live action like animatronic suits.
Yeah, they were cool. Yeah.
I did like those because I thought they looked cool. But here's the thing, G. Leading up to this movie, like we talked about it, and like I talked about like was the tone going to be over the top, or whatever else? Like, was it going to have fun with this idea?
Sure.
The answer is no. It plays it 100% straight the entire time, and I was legitimately and we're watching Flowers of the Killer Moon or Killers of the Flower Moon, whatever it is, next week on the show. That's 3.5 hours long, Gerald. I felt like I was in the theater for 3.5 hours watching this.
Oh, wow.
It drags on so long. There's a scene in this movie, we'll talk about it in spoilers, that it's kind of like the scene we talked about in Saw last week with the eyeballs, like the eyeball sucking trap, where it's only in the movie just to remind you that it's a Saw movie. There's a very, very similar scene that happens in this movie that we'll talk about when we get into spoilers. But like, I hated the performances in this. Josh Hutcherson looked like he was bored to tears in this thing. Like, could not summon a decent like line read or anything to save his life. And Mary Stuart Masterson, god awful bad. Everybody in this movie was so ridiculously bad, except for Matthew Lillard, who is not utilized.
Oh yeah.
Who is not utilized nearly enough. Well, open up some thoughts on this one.
Look, dude, I got the sign behind me. I'm the horror guy. Okay, let me just tell you that I was disappointed by this film overall. I honestly, it's funny to hear a lot of the things that you just said because I mirror a lot of the same sentiments. I thought the animatronics and the effects were great. Like those were badass animatronics that they were practical.
Yep.
I'm not sure how they did it. I don't know if there were actually people in there or whatever, but it was awesome to see. It was a really, really cool aesthetic. Matthew Lillard hamming it up was great. This kind of like cheeseball job placement coach or whatever. He was great in this, and we'll talk more about him when we get to the next segment as well.
Yep.
But aside from those components, like, it just was like, what the fuck is this? Like, I wish that it had really dove into the video game origin. And like you said, it had been really just campy, and just really kind of knew what it was. And it was silly, and it was Chuck E. Cheese, and it was like, these things coming to life and fucking nightmare fuel. But it was more like him dealing with his past and like shit that's happened with his little brother, which we'll talk about when we get there.
God.
And it was a lot of like serious kind of, I should say overly serious plot elements that it focused on with child custody and his trauma from his, the tragedy with his little brother, and a lot of other stuff that didn't have anything to do with Freddys. It didn't have anything to do with the animatronics, and that stuff took me out of it. And unfortunately, that was like 50-60% of the movie. So for arguably 60% of this movie, I was like, this sucks. The stuff at, Freddys at the restaurant, I thought was great. I really did. I feel like any of the scenes there, like the opening scene was really cool with the security guard that kind of, we get kind of the setup or whatever with the animatronics, and that opening scene I thought was really cool. And a lot of stuff that happens at the actual Fazbear's, I thought was great. But anything that wasn't set in that location, I hated. So that's half the movie at least.
Over
when
half.
you're talking about it. Yeah, when you're talking about his home life or whatever. Like, I just thought that stuff was unnecessary, and it was not why we were going to see this. Now, before we get to the spoilers, Nick, I will say I watched this on Friday night with my 10-year-old Logan. And you know of Logan. You've talked to him online before. He plays a lot of, Minecraft and Fortnite, and he's played Five Nights at Freddy's for the last couple of years, and he loves this shit, man. He has the figurines of these guys. He has all four of them, the main dudes or whatever, the animatronics. Yeah. So he knows all about this. So he's watching this movie, and I'll just tell you, his face and seeing him light up when these characters came on screen, he's like, "Oh, that's this person, and that's this character, and that's going to happen to her. This is about to happen to her." And like, he knew what was going to happen because it's very true to the video game. Is my point.
I've heard that
at least based on what my son was telling me.
Yeah.
So he kind of, I think this movie, and you mentioned this before when we talked about, I can't remember what film it was, but you said this movie was not made for us. And I feel like that's a perfect kind of tagline for our review of this film. It just wasn't made for us because we didn't play this game. And because I feel like the movie took itself too seriously at the end of the day. That's really what I hated about it.
I mean, and that's fine. But here's the thing. If you want to make things just for people that are going to get the references in it, and you don't want to like broaden it out and like make it accessible for all audiences, then you're going to have a bad time. Like we mentioned it last week with Saw as well, and I guess we should rip our way into the spoiler room here. We'll jump into the spoiler ball pit here. So here forward, folks, anything and everything. We're going to spoil everything about the movie. This had the same problem that Saw had last week, Gerald. It took an absolute eternity to set. So it has the scene at the thing at the very beginning, like the cold open
was great.
The security guard getting, like, that was cool, that was fine, that was whatever. Okay, and then it takes an eternity setting up this whole custody situation between his aunt and like his sister. Like, it's not his daughter in the movie, it's his sister, and everything like that. He is so like I get what they wanted to do. I get that they wanted him to have this trauma of he was there when his little brother was kidnapped and taken away, and he blames himself for it. There was a really good nugget of drama that you really could have played with here, because then he's neglecting his relationship with his sister because he, like, can't forgive himself for what happened to his brother, and he's got to kind of learn to like and that's what this movie wants you to go on. That's the journey this movie wants you to go on. But Josh Hutcherson is literally, you can tell he's in this movie and he has no faith in it whatsoever. Like his performance is god awful.
It
He's
was
just
like he was
literally just sitting there. Like, he kind of takes the job. Here's the thing. He takes the job at this place because he has no other choice, right? He has to take this job because he's trying to keep custody of his sister or whatever. So he's just going through the motions. Like, he shows up at work and he just sleeps through his shift every day. And then, like, that's Josh Hutcherson taking this movie, like signing up to be in this movie. Like, he's literally just show up. He's not passionate about it at all. Like, I don't feel any connection to this character whatsoever.
Well,
and, like, he's supposed to be the one that carries you through the movie. You know,
to your point, there was a couple scenes where like lives are in danger. Do you know what I mean? Like, his sister is in danger, like she might die, and he's just like, oh yeah, like it was a very flat performance. Like, it was really weird that I don't know. I just feel like this was weird that it made it past the editing room floor, his performance. A lot of strange kind of reactions to things that would have been like holy shit moments.
I've got a question for you too, G. I've got a question for you. How early, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna pull the Paul Perzula card here because this is what Paul does.
Okay.
How quickly did you clock that Matthew Lillard was the owner of Fazbear's? Because I clocked it about 4 seconds in.
Yeah,
because
it didn't take long at all.
They show the like training video and they talk about the genius creator, but they never show him. They never say his name or anything like that. I'm like, they're deliberately hiding this character's identity, and the only other person we've met in this movie that matters is Matthew Lillard's character.
Right.
And then he's really, really weird talking about this place, like, to Josh Hutcherson's character. So it's like, he's the owner of it. Like, it's so obvious from the jump.
I agree. It was extremely predictable in that way. And another thing that could be said was the cop, Vanessa, when she showed up initially, it was like 30 seconds after she showed up, I turned to my son and I go, well, she's going to be involved. She's involved in this. There's no way she's just a cop on her beat or whatever. Like, she's intimately involved in this situation. You know what I mean?
I already brought it up once today too, and I mean we'll bring it up again here. But we mentioned when we talked about the creator how contrived some of the plot elements were.
Yeah,
and you talk about plot contrivances, like this guy that founded Fazbear's and kidnapped all those kids happens to be the same person that kidnapped his brother. The cop happens to be his daughter. Yeah, like, why does it have to be? Why do you have to write things like this?
Yeah,
like,
it's too
all
much.
It does is just take away from like this simple idea of this movie of murderous Chuck E. Cheese robots.
Were there any of we're obviously deep into spoilers here, so I'll just ask you, but were there any of the like kills or the performances? Was there anything that kind of like made you kind of rise up in your seat a little bit? I have one, really.
No. And I'll tell you why, because this was rated PG-13, I'm guessing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
like there's a version of this movie, G, where they go over the top and they lean into it and they go hard R, and it's a bloodbath when these robots are like, like there's that one scene where Freddy bites the one girl in half, which I want to talk about that scene too. That's the scene that I talked about before.
That's the one I'm talking about.
That's great, but we don't see it actually happen on screen because it's PG-13. So it's like, you just see like the lower half of her torso and you see like the shadow of it. You see the shadow of it happen. Like, I really wish they would have leaned into this thing and really, I mean, but again, they made it PG-13 because they know their audience is young and they wanted their audience to be able to go through the movie. I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more if it was a lot harder R.
I would have too, but it's kind of a double-edged sword though, because I have seen a lot of the feedback for this film from people that have spoken favorably towards it, that it's a classic gateway horror film. And I could see that. I could see this as a film. I mean, I told you I saw it with my 10-year-old. Like, you know, seeing it through a 10-year-old's eyes is different than seeing it between you and I, right? I mean, we're not going to see it the same way as a 10-year-old sees it. So,
well,
I guess what I'm saying is I do respect it for being a gateway film for a younger audience. I do respect that.
I don't believe for a second that a kid who does not already know what this property is and isn't already intimately familiar with this world and these characters and these games, a 10-year-old that's never heard of Five Nights at Freddy's walking into this movie is going to be bored to tears.
Oh wow.
Absolutely bored to tears. I get that like the people that like love this movie are like, oh my God, I've been playing these games. I love all these characters, blah, blah, blah. They love like all this different stuff. Like that's your kid. Like he loves these characters. He loves these games. So of course he loved it because he got to get all the little, nostalgia bait and all those kinds of different. I mean, granted, he's like 10, so like, not a big timeline for nostalgia or whatever, but like that's like you're playing the greatest hits, baby. It's a greatest hits album of like, ooh, here comes Chica, here comes the one-eyed.
I know he was doing that too.
Thing with the
he was doing that too.
Stuff. Like,
so when the girl gets bitten in half or whatever, in that one scene you were talking about, which was probably my favorite horror-centric scene in the movie.
Yeah.
I did hate the lack of gore and blood, but I also knew that it was PG-13 and like whatever. But I guess that's called the Bite 87 or the 87 Bite. And my son was telling me before it happened that it was going to happen. So he's going, this is the 87 Bite. They're going to bite him in half. And I'm like, what? And then it happened. So I guess that's a part of the game. And that's like something that actually happened in the game. So that's kind of proving your point, though, that it's like playing to that audience that knows the game or whatever.
Sure, that's all well and good and all, but like, and here's my other thing, G. Here's my other thing. We talked about this last week, how Saw had the movie with the eye sucky hoses thing, and it turned out to just kind of be a dream, not even a dream, like a daydream that John was having about this kid, and it wasn't a real thing in the actual movie, and it was only in the movie, at least as far as I'm concerned, just to remind you that you're watching a Saw movie. So it only creates these other characters who are just god-awful terrible, by the way, just utterly you could tell from the jump, the second they're introduced, these are cannon fodder characters. You could just tell. And that whole sequence, they're only in the movie. That whole sequence is in the movie just to remind you, because we've been dealing with custody agreements and court documents and him looking for a job and all this nonsense for ages now. And it's only in the movie just to remind you that don't worry, there's still killer robots in the movie. Like we'll get back there. Don't worry. Yeah. Like it really just feels not very genuine to me. Like, it's one of the things I hate most about horror movies is that if you deliberately throw cannon fodder characters into the movie that I just know are there to die, like it drives me absolutely insane. And like especially since they were all cartoonishly reprehensible characters.
Sure, the babysitter was a little surprising though, right? Or no? I mean, did you see her getting killed that early?
Yeah, because she was there
coming over and babysitting.
She was there. She went there with all the other people.
I guess, but I feel like she was the one that was like a conflicted character where she was like kind of had allegiance to Mike, but also was on the other side with the aunt. And I don't know. I feel like that was supposed to be our connection where we didn't see that coming or whatever. But I'm agreeing with you that I thought it was super predictable and kind of played by the numbers, if you will. But
it's like like I said, that whole thing, like I really think like there's a good nugget of a movie in here, probably a tight 90 minutes of just murder, killer, death robots. I don't see why you need this whole ridiculous backstory of him with his brother getting kidnapped. And it surely does not need to be the same person that like started and created these robots and like all this different so contrived. It's so ridiculously contrived.
There is a better version of this, and it's called Willy's Wonderland, and we touched on it last week, and it stars Nicolas Cage. And not only does it star Nicolas Cage kind of hamming it up as we know him to do, but he doesn't speak any dialogue in Willy's Wonderland.
Wow.
Yeah, Nicolas Cage, kind of a silent performance.
Amazing.
He's in this mic role, and it's literally the same plot, but without the child custody crap and all the extra drama.
That was like horrible to deal with. That plot, every time they kept going back to that plot, like it just sucked. It just sucked so hard. And the stuff, the robot stuff, like the animatronics were cool and everything like that.
Yeah.
And there was a nugget in there, but it wasn't good enough to overcome how bad the rest of the movie was. Like the rest of the movie was so bad that like you would have had to have the most insanely amazing balls to the wall horror sequences with these robots doing all this different crazy stuff to even give this thing a vague ability to be entertaining to me.
Well, you have Mary Stuart Masterson, one of the Stepford wives, there in this movie, an icon, honestly, in this genre. And she's literally at the diner twirling her mustache.
Yeah.
I mean, that literally.
Cartoonish.
I mean, it's like you just so underutilized that icon. I mean, you could have easily turned that into something much more special and much more personal. And it would have had a face to it because she would have been the actress behind it. And then, when she dies, another kill that's off screen, they don't show us.
Yeah, we don't even see how she died. We just see her legs.
Is what it is or whatever. But I mean, nevertheless, it was an arc that was underused. I mean, it could have easily been a much more sympathetic villain that, had more valid reasons to kind of do what she was doing. I mean, we never really even find out why she is that way. I mean, I guess we're just supposed to assume she's a bitch or whatever.
Do we even need another antagonist in the film?
I mean, no, not really. No.
Besides the person who started this whole like thing, and like, I mean, okay, if you want to do the kidnapped kids and like stuffed them inside of robots and murdered them and done what, fine. Like, I could take that aspect of it, but like, why is the movie any more complicated than that? Why does it have this whole gigantic plot of the child kidnapping and him dreaming like he's got the Nebraska poster and like trying to go into his dreams, where he apparently can go into his dreams and just act out whatever he wants to do.
Convoluted, man.
It's
convoluted.
So ridiculously convoluted. Thank you. I utterly and completely hated this. This movie felt eternal to me, Gerald. I was dying slowly but surely. And every single time I was in that theater having to endure this thing, all I heard behind me was and I just saw a bright light in the corner, like down below, as this woman's on her phone.
You're like, we're not going to make it to the fifth night. I can't do this.
I legitimately, and I mean this very sincerely, I don't, as a principle, I pay money to go see movies. No matter how bad a movie is, I will gut it out. I almost walked out of the theater no less than 3 times during this movie. I vehemently hated every single thing about this movie except for the animatronics. It's terrible. If you're a fan of the games, if you're somebody who's played these games or whatever, you'll probably get something out of it that way. If you go into this looking for the barest bone, the tiniest sliver shred of an okay movie, spend your time elsewhere. And do it at home when you do it, because that way it'll save you from rude people at the theater.
I did. I watched it on Peacock, in fairness, I'll just go ahead and tell you. And with my 10-year-old, like I told you. And I think had I gone to see this in the theater, which I usually do whenever I can, but had I saw this in the theater by myself, this probably would have been like a 3, maybe. But seeing it with my son,
I think Logan elevated it for you for sure.
Yeah, he did. I mean, seeing it with him and him kind of like narrating the different characters and why it was cool that, these different, what was the thing that they kept showing with the fucking little prop that would pop up and scare people?
Oh, that like little clown thing with the balloon?
Yeah, so he knew that thing's name, and he kept saying like how cool that was, and they kept showing that.
I didn't know.
So little Easter eggs like that, like I don't get it. Like I'm like, all right, well, whatever.
I knew it had to be some kind of Easter egg to something, but I was just like, they kept kind of going back to that well, and I was like, all right, we get it.
Exactly. So I guess we can go ahead and kind of give our final thoughts, Nick. I mean, I think Josh Hutcherson was asleep during this. I really do. He was in a fucking coma. Like, I mean, this was like the worst. And I like him. I mean, honestly, I don't dislike him in any way. I just think he really cashed it in and just didn't really care. And I hated that Vanessa character. I mean, she was kind of there because it was like, she's going to be connected to the client. She's going to come in at the end and like, it's going to be a thing.
It's so ridiculously obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. And I loved Matthew Lillard, but I also knew he was also going to be involved in the final act in some way. I'm glad he was, to be honest.
Well, and here's the frustrating thing. I mean, it's Matthew Lillard. I mean, we were talking about Scream earlier on. You've got Matthew Lillard in a horror movie. You use every single ounce of Matthew Lillard that you can in your movie. You don't just have him in like the opening, like a early scene in the first act, and then not bring him back until the very
Sure.
end. You gotta bring that Matthew Lillard, man. Like I said, like think about Scream. Like seriously, you know,
Yeah.
like why
I
not
mean, even
have
I
him
mean,
in
even
it?
I mean, even the Scooby Doo films, the Shaggy. I mean, the guy's freaking icon.
I know why we
Like,
couldn't have him in the movie, because we needed like endless like repeats of the same scene of a car driving away with his brother, of the Coke bottle tipping over and
Yeah.
spilling on the edge of the picnic table, and like
Yeah.
all these different things that like just shoot up runtime of this thing. This movie's just god awful terrible. I hated
At the
this.
end, at the end of the day, it took itself too seriously.
It did.
Like it did not need to try to put me on an Amber Alert level. You know what I mean? Like, it could be ridiculous. It could be silly. Like, we've got these animatronics at Chuck E. Cheese or whatever killing people. Like, that's fine. Like, you don't need to bring it down to a grounded,
I really
like,
think too,
natural
like,
tone. You know what I mean?
if you're somebody that's not familiar with this franchise, when you see the trailers are even made to kind of make, and they're very quick to cart out from the producer of Megan, which kind of
Yeah.
leaned into itself. Like it leaned
Yeah.
into that thing. This doesn't at all. And like
Mm-mm.
even if you've never seen the trailer, like you look at this, or like you a brief like idea about it, like it's like they're literally like the Chuck E. Cheese robots come to life murdering people. You go sit down for this movie, you're like, this is gonna be silly, over the top nonsense. I can't wait. And maybe that's me carrying my own expectation into the movie, so I'm not like
Sure.
trying to check the movie for that, but like there were 1,000 better ways to make this movie. This wasn't it.
I
Like
agree.
I just don't get
I
I don't get it at all. I don't
think
get anybody, even unless you are somebody who like you're 10 and you really love the games. I don't get anybody that like really loves it either, and I don't understand why if they do. I really don't.
I think the main disconnect, and I think kind of what me and you are both saying, is that if you have a connection to the games and to the characters from the games, you'll probably dig the movie. But at the same time, the movie's going to lag for you when it comes to that custody battle shit and this kind of like extra stuff that goes on outside of Fazbear's, because I don't think that stuff was in the game. At least I assume it wasn't. So it's more of a backstory to kind of explain why these characters are in the game. But when you get dropped into that game in 2014 or whatever, you don't have all that backstory. You know what I mean? So I think if you played the games and if you're connected with those characters, then you'll dig this a lot more than Nick and I did. I liked it for the gateway horror elements to it. I feel like this was, it just took itself too seriously. That's the easiest way for me to say it. I wish it had been a lot more campy, a lot more silly, a lot more kind of like, oh shit, I can't believe they did that. You know, but they tried to make it much more natural and much more real when this is not a real setting. I mean, it's not a natural setting. Like, this kind of shit would not happen in real life. So why are you, planking it down in a real life scenario? Like, it just doesn't make sense. So it kind of contradicted itself in that way. I didn't hate it. I love seeing my son love it. Like, he loved it. Like, I asked him, I'm like, out of 5, dude, what are you giving this? And he's like, so his first answer was a 5. And I was like, a 5? Are you sure, bro? And he was like, all right, maybe a 4. I'll give it a 4. And I'm like, all right. But that kind of proves my point. Like, he's very connected to the game and to the lore, and I get that. You know,
He wasn't there. He wasn't there for all the custody stuff. And
yeah,
all
exactly.
that
Yeah,
stuff,
you know, I mean, it means more to people that are coming from that background or whatever. So for me, it's a 5. I thought the fucking bite in the torso or whatever, cutting the girl in half, was cool. I thought the cold open was really good. I like the animatronics were fucking awesome. I love the practical effects in this movie. I love Matthew Lillard in this movie. So for me, it's enough to earn a 5. I wouldn't recommend anybody go watch this, like I said, unless you love this franchise from its inception. Otherwise,
and even
there's no
then,
reason, stay away.
Honest to God, and even then, it's like I said before, the parts of this movie that are even passably okay are not enough to redeem how bad the rest of it is. The rest of it, the ghost children running around in his dreams, the constant
It's too much.
like his brother being kidnapped by the person who ended up building the robots, and all this different contrivances and stuff. Like the rest of the movie's so bad. Even if the stuff inside of Freddy Fazbear's with the robots was like 20 out of 10 levels of amazing, it still wouldn't save this movie.
Yeah,
it's god awful bad.
2 from Nick, a 5 from me, which sits at a 3.5 from the P's, which has got to be our lowest rated movie of the year, right, Nick? I mean, we started back in June or whatever.
I think so.
Yeah, so far. Wow. Five Nights at Freddy's. I don't know what to tell you guys. Don't see it unless you're a fan of this franchise, is probably what we're really kind of saying.
And even, you know what would have been cool? You know what would have been cool? Limit yourselves to not initially, or not for the whole movie, but at least for maybe right after he gets the job. Maybe take it straight from the game. Maybe not his first night, but maybe one of the nights. Yeah. He's trapped in that room, and he's got to figure out how to use the cameras and stuff to survive, and somehow he ends up surviving or whatever. I think maybe that would have been cool. And I was reading about that later. I was like, why didn't they do that? Like that would have been like really cool.
A lot more tense.
Kind of give you like this idea of the game. If like he's constantly looking at these cameras and then he sees a giant animatronic teddy bear walking down the hallway at him or something. You know,
that's right.
I think that would have been cool if they would have done that. But I for whatever reason they just kind of they kept everything else about it like really close to the games, but they abandoned that. And instead gave us, you know, all this custody nonsense.
Yeah, they felt like they had to give a backstory. But I mean, you don't need to do that, especially the way Hutcherson was acting. This like nobody thinks he cares. Like we're fine. Like just drop us into that universe.
It's perfect too, because I can't wait. I can't wait until we get into the comment section here.
Well, we're getting there
because I'm pulling up one question just because of the
good. All right, well that's a good segue then. So just to wrap up, guys, a 5 from me, which is not great, and a 2 from Nick, which is even worse. A 3.5 cumulatively from the P's on Five Nights at Freddy's. And to wrap up every episode, Nick, we head over to social media and we see what the fans had to say in the old comments section. We reach in there and we grab out a question to answer. I threw it up today, Nick. I remembered. Are you proud of me?
I was going to say that's not true. We don't wrap up every episode that way because sometimes Gerald's too lazy to put the post up, and then we don't have any of your amazing questions. Thank you all. Like you guys should just start
lazy is one way to put it.
On the thing anyway, when you know what we're going to be reviewing, just start spamming stuff at Gerald, like questions, even if he doesn't
guarantee the post is going to be there. That's true.
Yeah, even if he doesn't put a post up, like right now, we're watching Killers of the Flower Moon next week, so start hitting us with your Scorsese questions, not about his feelings on superhero movies. I don't care.
Is it the Flash of Scorsese movies? I can't wait till Julio says that. All right. You were chomping at the bit, buddy. You got one over there in the comment section?
I just really loved Hannah's question. Who slept more while you watched this movie? You or Josh Hutcherson? It's literally the perfect question. And I don't think it's possible for anyone to have slept as much as Josh Hutcherson did making this movie. He is legitimately, you can just, and maybe that's just how he was trying to carry the performance through this. I don't know. But like, to me, it was just like, dude, do you even care about this at all? Like, are you invested in this even remotely? Like, no. That's kind of a cheap one to take. So I'm going to jump on.
That's a good one though.
One more from Joey DiCarlo. Did you ever eat at a restaurant like the one the movie's based on? Yeah. Chuck E. Cheese.
Chuck E. Cheese,
Chuck E. Cheese, man. When I posted on social media, I said this could be even scarier if they made me eat Chuck E. Cheese pizza. Because like when I was a kid, I don't know if you had the same experience, but when I was a kid, that place was the greatest place ever. Because I don't know if you ever got to go to Chuck E. Cheese or whatever when you were a kid, but like when I went, like as a kid, because I gotta have like birthday parties and stuff there and like all these different things. And their pizza was this amazing deep dish pan pizza that was just loaded with cheese. Amazing. Like it was the most mind-blowingly amazing pizza ever. It was so good. And then by the time my kids grew up and got to go to Chuck E. Cheese, they had replaced all of their ingredients with cardboard. Their food is atrocious now. I know the company went bankrupt, although I think they're still trying to sell the pizza.
Oh wow.
Remarkably enough, like, I mean, the food,
Interesting.
taking my kids to the restaurant was like literally a trip through hell, because the food was so bad and they'd always want to get pizza or something like that. And every time, like, you
Oh
take
god.
it was god awful disgusting. But yeah, like, I grew up a Chuck E. Cheese kid. Like, that's
funny.
why when I saw the trailer
We-
for this, I was like, oh good, they're killer Chuck E. Cheese robots. Let's go.
Right. Let's do it. Yeah. There's one near us here, and I took my son. It was probably for his like 5th birthday, so it's maybe 5 years ago. And I'm kind of like, this is talking about the pizza. Like, this is horrible. Like,
It's one of the worst things you could ever put
it's
in
not
your
even
mouth,
edible.
ever.
You know
It's
what I mean?
terrible.
Like, it's crazy.
It's
But, yeah.
unbelievable how bad.
But hey, they serve beer there now. So
Yeah,
I'm good.
they serve alcohol now. So I guess if you have enough alcohol, then you won't notice how bad these.
Yeah,
taste.
you're good. You're good. All right, I'm gonna go over to Julio because he likes to ask, "Is this the flash of insert the blank?" But I'm gonna go to his actual question, which says, "Seeing the apparent backlash from sections of the horror community, would this movie had been better served if they had tried to sell it, if they hadn't tried to sell it as an actual horror?" So I've already kind of said that I think this movie is more of a gateway horror film. And at best, I mean, it doesn't really show a lot on screen from a horrific perspective. But I think that my kind of overall answer to Julio here is that the trailers show too much. In general, I'm not talking about just this I mean, this movie too, but just in general, the trailers and the marketing, they show too much these days. Like,
Yes.
keep it very ambiguous and kind of give the premise, a minute and a half is enough. And kind of like set the tone, but don't like give enough to where you're like mapping it out for the viewer. Because then if it doesn't play out like that, you're going to be disappointed. And I think, as we've already said 100 times tonight, if you're not a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise, and you just watch the trailer and you just want to see a horror movie and you go to watch this, you're not going to like it. Because it was marketed in a way that it was more like Willy's Wonderland, which I'm going to point back to anybody listening to this episode that hasn't seen that. That is a much better version of like the horror version of this, where there's no backstory, there's no character connection, there's no, like, none of it matters. It's literally Nicolas Cage in a Chuck E. Cheese with animatronics trying to fucking kill him. Like, that's the premise of the movie.
Sounds great.
And they're, that's
so
what
good.
that's what this movie kind of missed, in my opinion. So that would be my kind of roundabout answer to Julio. What do you say, man? Do you think the marketing of this as a horror was a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's fine. I mean, I think it's fine. I just think that I don't think the problem was even with the marketing. I think the marketing's job is to sell the movie. And I mean, judging by the box office, they did a pretty good job because it's making bank.
Right.
We're definitely going to get a sequel to this because this has made a ton, and we don't even know how much it made from like Peacock. What the 4 people, including you and Logan, that watched it on Peacock, probably like whatever. But like, I mean, like, I think the marketing probably did like its job better. But I think that, well, we already talked about it. Like, I think there's a really good, campy, over the top, hard R gore fest in here. Like, imagine like the babysitter like goes to bite her in half and everything, and then those geysers of blood like shoot all over the place, and like all these different things, and like entrails are falling out, and
Her
like
guts fall on
all
the
this
floor
different stuff, and like the robot
Yeah.
comes walking out of the back room with like one of her feet hanging out of its mouth and like blood dripping down, and like all this kind of different stuff. Like, you could lean into this and do like a super campy, like fun thing with it, like so easy. And I feel like it was a baffling take. Not only was it a baffling take to not do that when you've kind of got it built in. It's a Chucky. It's like the video game is obviously one of the biggest inspirations for Freddy Fazbear's is Chuck E. Cheese. Like, it's already like baked into the DNA of this thing to be kind of over the top and silly. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But not only did they not do that, then they doubled down on really, really wanting to make a bad movie by shoving all the convoluted nonsense into it. Like, the guy kidnapped his son, but also was the person that built the robots, and the police officer that kept showing up was really his daughter, and like all these stuff.
Right.
My God, like the custody
God
thing,
help
like
me.
all that. It just starts hand over fist shoving these plot elements into the movie. Like
God help me.
that, the horror stuff. If you isolate just the animatronic characters doing the kills, even the PG-13 stuff, the horror elements of this aren't the problem. Okay, it's everything else. It's every other part of this that's just
I agree with you.
God awful.
I agree with you. There we go, guys. So look, I didn't tell Dan this when he was here earlier, Nick, but I want him to release this on Halloween, like a day early. You think he'll do that? He'll do that, right? He's got nothing going on.
He might.
He'll be fine. So happy Halloween to all the listeners. And I was hoping that Nick and I would like Five Nights at Freddy's more, but I wanted to end on a horror movie leading up to the Halloween season. So
I was most
Halloween
excited
to
of all the
everyone.
horror movies that we watched. I was most excited for this one. Like I knew nothing about Totally Killer. Saw X I was apprehensive about. And I think, does that mean Totally Killer was my highest rating of all of them?
That was your highest rated.
I
it
like
went
Totally
downhill
Killer
for
the
you.
best. It just continued to slide down.
It went 7.62.
Yeah.
So a steep drop off.
Yeah.
Well, when we come back next week, guys, we're going to be talking about killers, but we're going to be talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. So a 3.5 hour Martin Scorsese epic. Nick and I just did Silence, by the way, on the show a few weeks ago. You can look that up if you'd like to check out our retro review of Martin Scorsese's Silence. But we will be talking about his newest film, Killers of the Flower Moon, next week. Nick, get in there, buddy. You're going to have to that's going to be a marathon.
I guarantee you it's going to feel less long than Five Nights at Freddy's did.
How many times are you peeing during that, though? Let's be honest.
Probably
Wear
not.
A diaper.
Probably
Let's
not at
be
all.
fucking dedicated, okay? Wear a diaper.
Yeah, I probably won't at all, to be honest. I really, like. Well, it depends. Like, I did I in Oppenheimer? Maybe I did during Oppenheimer.
Ooh.
I think I did during
I
Oppenheimer.
loved Oppenheimer. One of my faves.
I think I had to at some point during Oppenheimer. So I don't know. I might have to or something, because I don't know what it is about the way movie theater seats are designed or whatever. But like, I sit in those things. I get a water every time. I get like a bottle of water every time I go to the movies. And I swear to God,
Classic.
like every time I crack that thing open, I can go pee right before, or I can go pee right when I get to the theater. I sit down in that seat. I crack that water open. I take a little baby sip. All of a sudden, I gotta pee so bad. Like literally, I take like a baby sip of it.
You might need to get that checked.
It's the only time it ever happens. I swear to God, it's movie theaters.
I don't know if that's movie related. I feel like that might be a scientific thing that you might want to get looked at. All right, so Killers of the Flower Moon next week. Marty Scorsese, we both love him. We'll see what he's got going here, and we will report back on that epic 3.5 hour film. But I am looking forward to it as one of my blind spots this award season, nonetheless. So I'm looking forward to checking that one out finally. Nick, until next week, buddy, don't let any animatronics attack you. Just keep your distance. You'll be fine.
They could have come in the theater and killed me before I had to endure this movie. And it's like, and the experience of watching it too, like it was probably the worst even if it was a great movie, the theater experience would have been god awful terrible. Like people just have no courtesy and also need to exercise more so they don't.
Yeah,
I'm also sorry, everyone's ears that's listening to this on headphones, for all of my really loud breathing noises I'm making.
That sounded brutal, and I'm really sorry for that guy if he's listening. I hope that one dude is not listening that was in the theater with you today.
If you were at the 11:30 Saturday showing of Five Nights at Freddy's and you were sitting behind a tall dude,
oh man,
please go to the doctor.
You
need to do that little breathing machine with like the hose, and you blow into it and like see how you can like raise the air. Because
Nick, what do we got? 6 nights at whatever until we get together. Let's do it next week, man. Killers of the Flower Moon. I had a joke there, but I lost it. I'll see you then. I love you.
Love you, buddy.